Hi, my name is Julissa Camilo, and today I want to talk to you about the theme of social hierarchy in the novel Clara and the Sun. Before I dive specifically into the social hierarchy, I first want to talk about society and what does it mean. According to Merriam-Webster, it's a community, nation, or broad group of people having common traditions, interests, or collective activities. Um, so within Clara and the Sun, we actually see a couple of different societies. We have the parents that, for the most part, are in a society that's considered old-fashioned, and then the children are actually divided into two society. One is being lifted, which is a process in which children's intelligence is artificially engineered. And then the other is the children that are not lifted. And this is where we really start to see the social hierarchy because children that are non-lifted are looked down upon and they actually have limited opportunities offered to them. I have two examples here of society and the role that it plays specifically to this negative impact within social hierarchy. And when the first one is Josie and Rick having a conversation. Josie is very upset with Rick because they have a plan to have a future together, and she really wants to see it through, but she feels like Rick is not doing his best to make this plan come true since he is not lifted. What struck me the most about this is the sentence that comes next that Josie says, which is, how's it going to work if I've got society and you haven't? The reason this struck me is because, well, as I mentioned, those that are lifted have more opportunity, but she knew specifically the term society, and that really stuck with me because society is such a broad term and it covers so many aspects. So the way I interpret it is that she was saying, I have all of this, and you um, have all of this in the back pocket. And what do you have? What are you doing? So that's what really struck with me. My other example is Rick's point of view, who's non-lifted. He's actually concerned of losing who he likes, or what he likes of Josie due to her being lifted. She has to do these interaction meetings with other lifted children, and she's concerned, like as I mentioned, he's concerned he's gonna lose her and what he likes of her. Clara didn't understand this when Rick first explained it to her until in part two of the novel, where she actually witnessed the interaction meeting and witnessed a new side of Josie. In this new side of Josie, she was actually very distant with Clara. She didn't defend Clara when others were basically bullying her. And this was the first time that Clara thought to herself or realized that Josie may not always want her around. There's going to be time where Josie's going to want her distance. But until then, that was never the case. In terms of my personal response, to me, being lifted is not what seems so bizarre about this novel. It was the domino effect of being lifted. It affected the way children learn, and it affected the parenting style. Children are not learning in schools. They're not interacting with one another. They're actually learning from home individually. And because of this, they have to have those interaction meetings. Uh, so within those interaction meetings, parents are actually supposed to be very hands off, which is something that I also found odd because parents are supposed to help guide their children into being a better person. So because the children that are lifted have lack this social interaction, these social cues, that's why they have to be hands off. And that was so bizarre to me because it even included if they felt as parents that the children were bullying one another, bullying another person that's lifted or non-lifted, or even in a AF. And that's what struck with me because that's not something we're used to. If I was in this novel, my views will actually be considered old-fashioned because I just didn't grow up that way. I went to school, I interacted with others, I had friends come over and hang out with me, and so that struck with me a lot. Professionally speaking, I like to stick with those two terminology from earlier of lifted and old fashioned. We actually work with such a variety group of students from different generation, different cultures, different background, and we need to think about how to support all of these students. If we focus on the generation, we can consider the new generation as the lifted, because they grew up with technology. It's quicker for them to pick it up. They may be more used to using certain tools or want to use certain tools, while older generation did not grow up with that. They primarily grew up without technology. So they may not be as tech savvy, or they may not want to use certain tools and certain technologies. So as educators, we need to think about how can we actually help both group of students, especially when they're working, they're in the classroom together for the most part, and we are primarily working and learning remotely. So for my line of inquiry, I was really focusing on the idea of this negative impact that society and social hierarchy has. So like as I mentioned in Clara and the Sun, children that were not lifted had this negative impact on them, and they were limited with opportunities. And within our own society, we have had stigma connected to community college. So my line of inquiry is to learn more about what the current stigma is for community colleges according to society. So like has the stigma changed, or how can we change it? So to help with my line of inquiry, I found these articles on how to erase the stigma in community college, or how to reduce that stigma. How do you encounter students with the stigma? And I'm hoping that this will help guide me into a response to my line of inquiry. I also added references to book reviews on Clara and the Sun that specifically target being lifted. My theme, what I considered a hidden gem, so there wasn't too much conversation about being lifted. However, the reviews that I selected do talk at least a paragraph or two on being lifted, and some do go into more depth about, is this a positive or a negative impact on the children.